Before recorded history, man had already tamed wild horses. For 6,000 years, the horse was a swift conveyance, a source of power, and an engine of war. The jockey and his thoroughbred are but a continuation of this long partnership between man and animal.
Only in recent years have scientists begun to examine this animal athlete, to analyze its action and the dynamics of horse and rider. To consider its physiology and training. And it is only recently that the science of genetics has modified or reinforced the myths and intuitions which up to now have guided decisions in the breeding of racehorses. The thoroughbred is the result of a process of domestication which may have begun as long as 20,000 years ago, when some Ice Age artist drew the outline of his hand above a spotted horse. Now there are no wild horses, except for domesticated animals that are left to roam free, as wild horses once did. Such are the ponies of Sable Island. A family of mares and foals is jealously guarded by a dominant stallion. The many domesticated breeds of horses have obscure origins, but going far back in time to the fossil record, the horse provides one of the best preserved stories of the evolutionary process. 50 million years ago, as the dense forest disappeared, a small dog-like creature, Eohippus, was forced to adapt to open plains. By a series of mutations and new combinations of genes, it grew in size and developed a barrel-like body to house the large gut needed to digest grass. To survive, this body had to outrun its predators, and only a radical change in the structure of the leg made this possible.
These bones here demonstrate the changes in foot structure from Eohippus to the modern horse. Apart from the very obvious size difference, there are interesting anatomical differences too. Eohippus has 4 fully developed toes. This is fairly similar to a dog foot, and presumably it would have digital pads underneath each toe and some kind of flattened nail rather than a claw. And shortly after Eohippus, we come to this form, which already one of the toes is gone. This now only has 3 toes. The central one is already becoming the predominant one, though the side toes would still probably touch the ground. In the next stage, these side toes in the natural position don't come anywhere near the ground. And in the horse itself, the side toes are reduced to these so-called splint bones, which only come to about this level. Obviously, they don't touch the ground at all. At this stage where the central toe is developing, it's the equivalent of the large finger in the human hand, but by the time you get to Equus, all the side fingers have gone and the horse is essentially just running on this one finger.
The finger has been transformed into the hoof and pastern and bends at the fetlock joint to the horse's weight. Above the fetlock is the straight cannon bone, and between the cannon bone and the upper half of the leg is the carpus joint, equivalent to the human wrist. The leg is articulated by muscles from the elbow attached by long tendons to the pastern. But there are unique, extra fixed ligaments in the horse, stretching around the fetlock, which act as springs, storing the energy of impact and springing back as the horse moves forward in its stride. Working from MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts, George Pratt analyzes the biomechanics of a horse's gait by using an accelerometer attached to the hoof. A backpack holds a recorder, which is light enough to be carried by the rider and which is wired to the accelerometer. When switched on by the rider, it will keep a continuous plot of the vertical accelerations of the hoof as the horse goes through its paces.
We've recorded with an accelerometer on the horse's hoof the impact of every step. And here we have a record of each stride, every event during the stride. And these shaded peaks are the impacts. So here is stride, 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 stride. These shaded peaks here record the impact peak with the ground. The flat portion later on is when the hoof is seated on the racetrack, and this peak which follows is the snap of the foot coming out of the track. Now the hoof is in the air, and this big peak here is when the hoof reverses its direction in front of the horse and comes back down towards the ground to the next impact. So here we have impact, 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 impact. We're in the air, in the air, in the air.
The horse evolved originally to run on natural turf, and it performs best, therefore, when there is a similar resilience in the track.
The horse's legs are really a set of springs, and he bounds forward from stride to stride on those springs. But the racetrack is also a spring. Therefore, you have a biomechanical problem of the springs in the horse interacting with the spring in the track. We've devised a drop hammer test, and this drop hammer test measures the resilience or the bounce of the racetrack. It also measures the ability of the track to absorb the shock of the impact. You want this system to be tuned so that when the animal's leg compresses the track, he gets that energy back by the track coming back to him before his leg goes on by. If the track is too slow, he compresses that track, and before the track can respond, the horse has left, and therefore he's deposited that energy in the racetrack and gets a little of it back. If the track's too hard, though, he compresses the track comes back and then recompresses before he's left. So again, he's left energy stored in the track. If it's tuned just right, he compresses that spring, and the spring comes back to him just at the moment the foot leaves the ground. Under those circumstances, you have a tuned track, and you can improve times by about 3%, and as a matter of fact, those are the safest tracks to run on. And what you find is that speed and safety, in a sense, do go together. They're not things that are in inevitable conflict with one another.
Before the advent of photography, it was quite beyond the human eye to visualize the whole flowing movement of the thoroughbred. No horse ever went through the strange spread-eagle contortions depicted by the artists of the 18th century. But now, motion picture film, exposed at 500 frames per second, can be combined with the calculating capacity of a computer. Using this combination, George Pratt has constructed a biomechanical model of a thoroughbred's action. The movements of various parts of the horse's anatomy are plotted and fed into a computer. From these measurements emerges an overall rating as to how economical or wasteful in energy is the animal's action, and therefore how good a racehorse it is likely to be.
What you look for in a good gait is the ability of a horse to extend himself. That means he's going to get the most forward motion off of each leg, one after the other. When a horse generally runs, more than one leg is on the ground at the same time. And that means that those two legs on the ground are duplicating their motion. An extreme example would be the pogo stick, where every leg is on the ground at the same time, and he goes through his step with all four legs and then leaps into the air, and then all four legs take the same step. That would be the most inefficient stride a horse could take. The most efficient would be the spokes of a wheel. Every leg down, one after the other, and then into the air, and then every leg. A horse, of course, does something in between that. The great horses have an ability to extend themselves, to get the maximum forward travel from each leg that they can get.
This is the Thoroughbred. What were its origins from amongst the family of horses? For an answer, we go to the Agricultural Research Institute in Dublin and its director, Paddy Cunningham.
The Thoroughbred has very interesting origins. It started in Britain sometime in the 1600s. At that time, the horses would have been quite heavy horses because, by and large, in the centuries before that, the horses that the nobility would have had were primarily to carry men in armor.
But warfare in the desert required light horses with speed and stamina. Arab stallions, often captured in the wars between Islam and Christendom, were carried back to England to impart their qualities to a new breed of racehorse. The crossing of local mares with these imported stallions began in the days of the Stuart kings. Charles II and Nell Gwyn already enjoyed racing on Newmarket Heath. The Byerley Turk, captured at the siege of Buda. The Godolphin Arabian. And the Darley Arabian. By 1750, a new hybrid had emerged from stallions like these. A supreme example is Eclipse, an unsurpassable champion of his day. A witness said of him, he blew like an otter and ran as wide as a barn door. 9 out of 10 thoroughbreds today carry his genes. And his hoof has been duly enshrined on a plate of solid gold at the Jockey Club in Newmarket.
And of course, you come then to the end of the 1700s, and it became necessary to put a certain order on the whole thing. So Mr. Weatherby decided he would set up a little register of horses for himself and his friends. And from that start, you have then the foundation of the Thoroughbred as we know it today.
In 1836, an escapade involving Lord Bentinck's champion Ellis pointed to the 20th century. Bentinck raced Ellis at Goodwood a few days before his horse was due to run on the St. Leger, 200 miles away in Doncaster. In those days, the only way between track and track was for horse and groom to walk across country. When the bookies learned that Ellis could not reach Doncaster in time, they lengthened the odds. To their amazement, Bentinck immediately wagered a fortune on his horse to win. The bookies were dumbfounded when Ellis appeared and won handily. Bentinck, in great secrecy, had constructed the first horse van, which, drawn at a brisk canter, covered 80 miles a day and delivered a fresh, rested Ellis well in time.
It is simply an extension of this technology that has made horse racing an international industry. There are 500,000 thoroughbreds in the world today. 30% of their genes derive from the 3 original Arab stallions, and 80% can be traced to 30 known animals 20 generations back. Genealogy and performance can be recalled from today's computerized equivalent to Mr. Weatherby's register. Genetics is a statistical science based on large populations. Most offspring will fall below the high quality of sire and dam by the normal process of genetic regression. But there are, on the other hand, surprises. Canadian-bred Northern Dancer was ignored as a yearling, but went on to become a champion and to pass on his genes to a string of champions amongst his progeny. His famous son Nijinsky, out of Flaming Page, was a winner of England's Triple Crown. How closely can science predict the outcome of a particular mating? Does the study of genetics support the mystique of ancient bloodlines?
Science obviously can't answer all the problems in thoroughbred breeding. In fact, obviously we don't want to take all the uncertainty out of the business, or we wouldn't have an industry anymore. But if I were putting my money on breeding decisions in the thoroughbred industry, I would tend to put it on actual recorded performance, particularly handicap ratings and so on, these actual objective measures of track performance. I would pay a lot more attention to close relatives rather than distant ones. Anything beyond a grandparent, I'd be prepared to throw out the window, forget about it. If science says that today's animal, and particularly its offspring, has so few genes in common with anything that's 3 generations in the past, that you're wasting your time using that remote ancestor as a guide to what will happen today.
As the old saying goes, breed the best, to the best, and hope for the best. Stallions are the most rigorously selected, and those at Winfield Farm are kept fit for their work. Only 2 of every 100 colts pass on their genes, a selection far more intense than in nature. A stallion will cover about 50 mares in a season. 2/3 of these will be fertile. Something over 30 foals, therefore, will be the progeny of one stallion. Readiness for breeding is determined by the mare's reaction to a stallion, a process known as teasing. When a mare is in estrus, she will tend to accept the stallion's attentions. The lowly teasing stallion is only required to show ambitions toward parenthood, to test the mare's response.
Okay, that's good.
But ambition is as far as he will be allowed to go. When it's confirmed that a mare is in estrus, she is taken to the breeding shed, in this case at Calumet Farm in Kentucky. There, Aladar has been at stud since his famous battle with the Firm for America's Triple Crown in 1978. The mare is protected from being bitten by the stallion. But she also has a twitch on her upper lip to distract her if necessary. As an added precaution, a front leg is temporarily strapped to discourage her from kicking and possibly injuring the stallion, a multi-million-dollar investment. When she has accepted the stallion, her leg is released. It is a strict rule in the industry that conception must be by natural means. Artificial insemination could drastically narrow the already highly selective male contribution to the breed. The gestation period of a foal is 11 months. The birth of a thoroughbred receives plenty of human attention to make the process as easy as possible for the mare. But many of the instincts and attributes acquired by the horse for survival in the wild have remained deeply encoded within it, even after generations of domestication.
One more and it's over. One more and it's over. Another good one. Another one. Come on. Another good one. Come on. That's the girl. Come on. Come on, girl. Another one. Come on. Come on. That's the girl. Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. It's okay. No. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, okay.
The umbilical cord is cut, although the mare herself will later look for the cord in order to bite it off. There is one imperative: to be quickly up and on the move. With predators on the open plain, there would be no period of grace. Flight would be the sole defense. Within 15 minutes of leaving the womb, the foal is attempting to stand. Within 25 minutes, it is on its feet as the mare seeks to cut the umbilical cord. Within 30 minutes, the foal is feeding. This is the point where nature ends and the nurture of a racing thoroughbred begins. Within a day or so of birth, the foal will be running with the herd with an astonishingly precocious gait. There follows the serious business of play. Coordination will be of paramount importance to the future athlete, and this is very much a matter of genes.
This all goes back to what's called the motor program. There is a so-called motor program contained mostly in the spinal cord, and this controls the timing of the legs, how the limbs move. It's pretty much a hardwired affair. The thesis in gait analysis is that the animal has a hardwired program in there, that he can do very little to control, and that the trainer can do very little to control. Great horses are born, they're not made.
Character is also highly dependent on heredity. Which of these yearlings carry within them the magic combination of speed, stamina, and the will to be first? As the summer yearling sales approach, important judgments and choices will soon have to be made. Will this Winfield colt out of South Ocean carry on the multi-million-dollar tradition of his sire, Northern Dancer? Or will there be surprises from less illustrious pedigrees? Predicting a winner in an untried yearling has long been considered a black art, at least as recounted by Michael Osborne at Ireland's National Stud Farm in Kildare.
The original founder of this stud farm, William Hall Walker, Scotsman, had the unique ability of being able to read horses' horoscopes at birth. Now, he did that by looking at the angle between the moon and the stars at the moment of birth. And if he said a foal was born with a good horoscope, it turned out to be a top-class racehorse. If he said that the horoscope was bad, it turned out to be useless. Couldn't win a race anywhere in the world.
The summer yearling sales in Keeneland, Kentucky. Buyers may have progressed beyond astrology, but science can add no certainties to the intuition and experience of this international gathering. Amongst many others, this Winfield's colt by Northern Dancer is brought out for inspection.
Of course, fantastic amounts of money are spent sometimes at yearling sales, and in my view, a good deal of this is spent very unscientifically. Given the amount of information that you can have on a yearling, the precision with which you can predict his ultimate performance is limited. And therefore, to spend $1 million or $2 million, as is occasionally spent on single horses, is, well, I think you've got to have the money to spare if you're going to do it that way.
But money to spare there seems to be. A gamble of $1 million or two might one day pay back $30 million in syndication fees. But there have also been expensive horses that have never won a race. The Northern Dancer colt is on the auction block as HIP 156, and the verdict of buyers will soon be known. Up to now, the highest price paid for a yearling is $1,700,000.
What'd you say? $1,725,000. Thank you. $1,750,000, Chris. Thank you. $1,750,000, $1,800,000, $750,000 into the And now, Chris, let's get $2 million and run them off and shut the door. What do you say? $2 million. Let's just beat him to the pass. Thank you. Now $2 million. $1,000,002. Thank you. $2,100,000. 1, 2. Thank you. $2 million. 1, $2 million. 2 million. 2 million. 1 million. What do you do? What do you do when you're out? 2, 3. $2 million. 2. 2 million. 3. 3. 5. $2 million. 3. 2 million. 5. What do you do? Thank you. $2 million. 6, sir. $2 million. 5. 2 million. 6. 7. $2 million. 7. What do you do? 8. $2 million. 8. 9. $9 million. 9. $3 million. $2 million. 9. 3. Thank you. 3 million. 100. What do you do? 3 million. 1. 3 million. 1 million. 1. 2. 3. 3 million. 2 and 3 million. 3. What do you say, Genie boy? 3. 5. Thank you. 3 million. 5. How about that? 3 million. 3. 3 million. 5. What do you do? 3 million. 5. Thank you. 6. 3 million. 5. Look at 3 million. 6 and hold on. 3 million. 5. Here we go. 3 million. 5. 3 million. 6. What do you do? All through. 3 million. 5 and... He's got a heck of a notion. $1 more $100,000, my son. Thank you. At 3 million 5, 3 million 60, one of the 3 million 5 and we sold him to your buyer, Joe, 3 million 5.
Whether a $3.5 million prospect or a $20,000 long shot, like Triple Crown winner Seattle Slew or Northern Dancer himself, there follows the same build-up to the only test that ultimately counts, the racetrack. A winter of slow work, building strength, and learning to work with a rider leads to the spring conditioning of a 2-year-old, well-muscled and on the edge of racing fitness. It is on the backstretch at tracks around the country that all the workaday preparations are made for the serious business of racing. It is here that science can make its greatest contribution. Young horses develop bone strength at different rates, and the bones of mature horses fatigue and weaken if not sufficiently rested between races. Many breakdowns could be prevented if this ebb and flow of strength could be monitored.
We'd like to develop a method to measure the strength of bone in a live animal. Can this horse of yours go out and stand the stress of racing, or should he be rested further? And one way to do that is to measure the velocity of sound through bone. We do this measurement in the laboratory with a device of this type that launches a sound pulse from this side and catches it over here. It's a pitch and catch affair. We put this on the bone, eventually on the leg of the live animal, and we launch a sound pulse here. We catch it here. This vernier measures the separation between pitch and catch. We know how far the sound went, and we can time it on an oscilloscope and get a TV picture of the pitch and catch process.
The required data are obtained using cannon bones that have been fatigued in an automated press, and for which the sound transmission speed has been measured. The known transmission speed for each bone is related to strength by taking the bone to the point of fracture. Using these sound speed data to monitor bone strength in a live animal could eliminate many of the tragic accidents that occur as a result of broken limbs. Prevention requires only a simple non-invasive measurement.
That's 2.865 inches on the vernier and 15.6 microseconds on the scope. The horse's heart goes from 23 or 24 up to a level of perhaps 250, a factor of 10, an enormous change in the amount of blood that's pushed through his body when he's under maximum stress. And it's the ability of that horse to essentially nourish his muscles while he's in that tremendous physical exertion phase of running. How well can he bring oxygen to the muscles, remove the poisons, keep going at this maximum output?
To be able to monitor the changing heartbeat of a horse would be a powerful tool in the hands of a trainer. And to this end, George Pratt has developed an onboard heart rate indicator.
Ready? Got lots of room there, then? Cable.
There is a readout panel for the jockey, and the trainer will be able to receive and record a transmitted signal.
How's that? Too tight? No, fine. I think it's all right. We can put it through there if you want. Whatever.
Want to take a second?
Yeah.
The heart's response to effort and the rate at which it returns to normal is a sensitive indicator of training progress. The many racing stables in England's Newmarket are engaged in a research program to monitor the condition of thoroughbreds in training. Blood samples are taken regularly to be checked at the Equine Research Center. Slight variations in blood chemistry can point to subtle and subclinical changes in condition. A previous sample has shown this horse to be incubating a virus infection. And in addition to a fresh sample, a swab will be taken from the animal's sinuses. In recent years, serious epidemics of influenza have spread through whole stables and kept them from racing for long periods. Proper diet can account for the few yards in a race that separates first from sixth place. This highly automated equipment at the Equine Research Center meters out samples of serum, dries them, then heats them so that they can be viewed through a spectral filter to detect the presence or absence of trace elements vital to good nutrition. Regular sampling establishes a baseline profile of blood composition for each horse. This equipment can detect slight changes from this baseline in enzyme and other protein levels which might signal a problem. For instance, excess of certain enzymes suggests muscle damage from overtraining. What will be the result of this extensive research? It will certainly mean that horses will be better nourished and better trained and will run on faster and safer tracks. This alone will result in improved performance. But what improvement is likely from the genetic potential within the breed? How much faster is the Thoroughbred today than in the days when Mr. Weatherby compiled his register? For some partial answers, we go from Newmarket Heath to Epsom Downs.
Now, Monkey Verde, 4.5 and the odds are play. Number 3, that's a different ticket. Thank you. Five to build on the Derby. Defense now. Have you not got to here? Each way on the Derby. Five to build. Five to on the build.
For more than 150 years, the Derby has been both a horse race and a carnival. The scale today is different from that of 1857, when Frith painted his celebrated Derby Day scene, but the character has altered little. A contemporary described the crowd as intense like the heat, with dandies of men and dandies of women. Oxford scholars, gypsies, men of the world, charlatans, crestfallen victims of the blasphemous mob, all rubbing shoulders with the greedy, obscene bohemianism that riots on Epsom Downs. The original grandstand was replaced by a new one in 1879, which still exists. But now, the most important unchanging feature is the course over which the races have been run. After the long climb to the top of the down, there's the steep drop to Tattenham Corner to test the control of tired limbs. And then the final uphill straight to the finish. Over this identical course, accurate winning times have been kept since the 1840s. Faster and faster times were posted throughout the 1800s. But since about 1910, or for 70 years, there's been virtually no improvement. Could it be that the original 30 animals 300 years ago provided too narrow a genetic base for a sustained advance?
Initially, the base, even though it's relatively few animals, would have been quite broad. After all, you had the mixing of English genes and genes from all over the Arab world. So it's quite a broad base to begin with. But we've had 21 generations of selection since then. And if we have a narrow base today, it would be more the result of the intense selection for performance over that period than due to the genetic base that we started with. Intense selection over many generations has produced a genetic plateau, rather difficult to break out of.
If this is so, logic would demand an infusion of new genetic stock. But the people who control the money in racing would be disinclined to gamble on long-term genetic experimentation on the off chance of finding one superior hybrid amongst vast numbers of genetic also-rans. It's a price the industry at present simply would not be willing to pay. In any case, evidence is inconclusive, as records still are being broken, although by ever smaller margins.
The winning of races is a matter of teamwork between horse and rider. The jockey must see that his horse is standing four square when the gate flies open, and must be ready as it gathers itself, dropping down on its haunches to make the first lunge onto the track. A good jockey will keep his own body riding level, allowing his horse to move up and down beneath him, minimizing the amount of work the horse must do. As with a human athlete, a horse will run the first quarter mile anaerobically, consuming fuel that does not require oxygen from the bloodstream. But from then on, the horse depends on lungs and heart to supply oxygen to the muscles. Through his hands, the jockey must control his mount to as even a pace as the tactics of the race allow. Slow going, combined with bursts of speed, consume an enormous amount of extra energy. With a great lung full of air at every stride, and a heart beating 4 times a second, the Thoroughbred is one of the greatest aerobic engines in the animal kingdom, nourishing a massive array of muscles in a display of speed and stamina that is unequaled.
When a race finishes in the final eighth of a mile, it very often looks as though some very fresh animal is coming on and he passes everybody. Usually that's just not the case at all. The other horses are slowing down, and it's the animal who can run that last quarter of a mile in 24 seconds that is going to win, and the others are backing up, as it's said, and they're running that quarter mile in 25, 26 seconds.
As Secretariat overtakes his stablemate Riva Ridge to win the Marlborough Cup, slow-motion film shows how his gait approaches the ideal, where each leg in turn provides motive power, the spokes of a wheel, as near a continuous flow of thrust as 4 legs can contrive. However near to genetic limits the thoroughbred has come, there are still horses born that we can only wonder at.
Well, then you get a horse like Secretariat who does these incredible things. He runs the Belmont in 2:24. It's 31 lengths back to the next horse. He runs the Kentucky Derby with every quarter run faster than the preceding one. That just doesn't happen. You take Secretariat and put him into a biomechanical model on a computer, and smoke comes out of the back of the machine. He shouldn't be. I had the privilege of going to Claiborne Farm and seeing Secretariat. He looked like he would run right straight through a stone wall. He is a mountain of muscle. He's a mountain of dignity. He's a mountain of aristocratic bearing. He is the most impressive alive creature I have ever looked upon. He came out of the stall and, my God, I was frozen in my tracks. The heart stops, you know.
Secretariat, son of bold ruler, northern dancer by Nearctic. These are the ultimate result of 20 generations of selective breeding. The minstrel, after Nijinsky, the second son of northern dancer to win the Epsom Derby. Apart from approaching genetic barriers, it may also be that rigorous selection is pushing the elite of the breed closer to its physical limits, that there is no new genetic combination that could make this racing machine of flesh and blood run faster. In a brief 300 years, man has built on 50 million years of speed and stamina to arrive at the thoroughbred. Whether there are genetic or physical reservoirs still untapped, science cannot yet give a certain answer.
Secretariat, Northern Dancer, Man o' War, Hyperion, Seabird, St. Simon, the Tetrarch, Eclipse, the Godolphin Arabian, the champions and the also-rans, and the men and women who lived and died for them, have left as their legacy a sport for kings and commoners alike. Though sometimes an exploitation, it has most often been a celebration of one of nature's marvels, a creature with a magic way of going, the thoroughbred.